Talk Radio. You're in to all things music.
Welcome to Intersect Radio, where music, faith, and life converge. With your host, Aaron the A-Train Smith.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Intersect Radio. That drumming grooveness, smoothness is done by my guest today, Mr. Chester Thompson. Yeah, I hear the applause. Yes, yes. Yes, Chester is here in the house, man. Been trying to get him here for some time, and we finally hooked up.
It's good to be here.
Yes, for those of you who don't know, Chester is a renowned percussionist, highly regarded for his ability to move seamlessly between genres. He's known best for his work with Weather Report, Frank Zappa, Genesis, and Phil Collins. He shared the stage and or studio with notable legends such as Freddie Hubbard, Ahmad Jamal, Wayne Shorter, Rodney Franklin, Kirk Whalum, Taj Mahal Keb Mo, Michael McDonald, Santana, and many others. Man, you have a great career.
It's been a good run, man.
Yeah, man, you're still running.
Yeah, there's that.
That's great. Well, welcome. There's so much more, that hopefully we'll cover in this conversation, like your new band and what you're up to these days, But first of all, you were born in Philadelphia?
No, Baltimore.
Baltimore. Yeah. Baltimore.
Yeah, just right down the road.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows your music pretty much and has heard you play and seen you in countless videos, especially with Phil Collins. But I knew you first of all with Weather Report, I remember living in Boston and going to a studio one day and seeing your drum cases in the studio. And I figured, I have arrived. That's Chester Thompson's drum cases over there, and I'm in this room. So tell us, what was it like growing up in Baltimore?
It was a good town, actually. It was a good time to grow up there. I started doing the club thing pretty early at 13. And
when did you start playing drums?
I guess 12, maybe 11, something like that. The first actual lessons were 7th grade school band.
Uh-huh.
And so that summer between 8th and 9th grade, I was had been taking lessons with a family friend who's a jazz drummer by choice. He, could play everything, but he chose to play jazz, and that's what he started teaching me. So he would teach me to play along with records and what to listen for and how to phrase stuff. And I was at his house one day, and someone was looking for a drummer for a soul band, which is what it was called back in those days. Right. And he wasn't interested, but he was about to hang up. Then he goes, "Wait a minute, I think I got a drummer for you."
Cool. So
we covered the handpiece, covered the phone, and leaned over and asked me if I wanted a gig. Of course I want a gig.
Right.
So that's kind of how it started. I didn't have a drum set, so he loaned me his to audition because he told them my age, and they said, "Well, we got to hear him,"
Uh-huh.
And fortunately, I had an uncle that had enough credit we went down and got a used drum kit, and I started working that next week and worked all through school.
Oh, killer! What kind of tunes were you playing?
Oh goodness, the cover tunes of that day: early Motown, James Brown, Otis Redding. Booker T and the MGs. I think we even played Green Onions in that first band I was in. Yeah, it was a lot of that. By the age of 15, I was in some all jazz groups. They had jam sessions at least twice a week in Baltimore. I mean, where all the serious players would come out.
Mm-hmm.
So I started going to those probably 14, 15, and the guys would let me play, and they were real good to kind of tell you, like, you know, you might want to do more of this, less of that kind of thing. They really
great.
helped you. They were, you know, real mentors, you know.
Yeah, that's great. They didn't throw you out.
No, they were really cool about it.
Yeah. What years are we talking about?
Oh, goodness. The first gig would have been 62.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. 13. And you didn't have any problems getting in clubs and stuff?
No, I mean, you know, on breaks, I'd either be in, if they had an office, or if it was summertime, you just stand outside hanging with the guys.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit at a bar, not that I wanted to anyway, but, you know, most places, you know, as long as I wasn't around physically close to the alcohol, it wasn't, and it was kind of a novelty for a lot of places, you know.
Yeah.
I'll never forget one place, usually was real inner city stuff. So I get this one gig out in the suburbs, and, you know, we were a little concerned. So my mother drew a little mustache on my homie with eyebrow pencil. And by the end of the gig, the lady comes up and says, "By the way, your mustache is running." You know?
That's cool. You know, I started playing in clubs when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same thing. You know, as long as I was playing, I was all right. I had to stay in the dressing room.
Exactly. Well, most of these joints didn't have dressing rooms, but
yeah, I know. It was either the dressing room or go sit out in the station wagon.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah, it was.
We had two drummers.
Oh, okay.
And he would let me play all the songs he didn't like.
Okay.
So he'd come up to the stage and go, "Okay, Lil Smith, that's it. That's it for the night," you know. So the rest of the night I was either outside or in the dressing room, you know. And I had to tear down the equipment and load it up, you know. It was cool. So what happened after you graduated high school? Did you stick around Baltimore for a while?
No, went on the road. By the time I graduated high school, I'd been in a bunch of bands. Mm-hmm. Heard too many road stories. Someone actually came up to recruit me from a college in Virginia, and I wasn't in school that day, so I missed that. The band I was in, we ended up with a booking agent, and we just hit the road playing cover tunes, mostly in the South. Mm. So we were just, you know, this black cover band doing soul music, playing only white clubs in the South. It was interesting.
Yeah, that sure was.
Most of it was really cool. We only there was only one incident of like really blatant racism. Mm-hmm. And that was, you know, we used to love to shoot pool, and we were walking Jacksonville Beach, and there was a guy standing outside, you know, and he was really complimenting us because he'd been to the gig the night before, and he was really, you know, very complimentary. And we looked up and realized it was a pool room. He said, "Man, we'd like to come in and shoot some pool." And the guy was like really embarrassed. He says, "Man, I can't let you in," you know. And he was really embarrassed. I mean, he was, you know, he says, "I'm really sorry," you know. So we did what we always did in those situations, in those towns, especially when it was time to find some food. First thing we looked for was the railroad tracks.
Right.
And sure enough, you cross the tracks. It was not just a cliche in those days, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. It was not. It was very real.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, other than that, it was really fine. It was, you know, I wasn't much of a partier. I had like the little fold up Remo practice kit in my suitcase. So every night after the gig, I'm in the hotel room woodshedding. You know?
Wow, cool. So where'd you get your inspiration to practice at such a early age?
Oh, goodness. I mean, the first people I listened to was like Max Roach, Art Blakey, you know. Elvin ruined everything trying to figure out how to play like that, you know. No, there were some pretty serious players growing up in Baltimore. There were a couple of guys my age as well that were doing like, you know, really busy. I mean, you know, playing clubs and stuff. I'm not sure I have no idea what either one of them does now. They kind of got a little sidetracked in each case. But no, I had no problem with practicing, man. I did and still just love to play the drums. You know?
What were you practicing? Did you have a method book or anything like that?
I took myself through the Chapin book, Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer. Basically stick control, accents and rebounds. I didn't have a teacher, but just I read well enough that I just took myself through those.
And you learned how to read in school.
Yeah, I actually learned how to read before I got to junior high. We used to have these little plastic flutes in elementary school. They called them song flutes. They only played in one key in C. You could play a couple of accidentals on them. But my sixth grade teacher, she would write, we'd had certain songs we learned, and she'd write on the board like T for thumb, 1, 2, 3, how many fingers. And I said to her, I want to learn how to read music. I don't want to just look at the numbers. And she started teaching me how to read music.
Okay. Cool.
And so by the time I got to where there was actually a school band, basic 8th, quarter, 16th stuff, I was always, pretty much had a little bit of a grip on. Obviously, you had to practice and get better, but
right.
yeah.
So you had your rhythm thing down.
Well, pretty much. I mean, stuff on the radio was pretty simpler. It was much simpler then. Again, like I say, most of my practice was jazz.
But I mean, to go through the Chapin book and control and stuff, you could read.
Oh, I could read that stuff. Yeah.
That's cool.
The funny thing about the Chapin book, I went through it, and then a couple of years later, I realized, I didn't play the accents, and it's a whole nother world, man. When you do that,
it is. Well, especially with accents and rebounds,
Goodness. Yeah, exactly.
It's very intense, it's very tricky.
I don't know. I wasn't good at much else, so I just really loved doing that,
Yeah. So you're on the road with the R&B band. How long does that go on before you
did that? Started that. My very first road trip was the end of my school graduating year, 66. Ended up going to a gig in Atlanta. The gig was a disaster, actually. But then we went out the next night and sat in at a club, and they kind of would bring us back every year for like 6 weeks at a time, actually sometimes twice a year.
Really?
Really beautiful club in Atlanta, yeah. And we would do that. We ended up with this booking agent, and we would just start going all over the place. That ended up going through probably 2 or 3 different groups, same kind of core guys. And basically we did that. Eventually, at the end of 5 years, I ended up touring with an organist, Jack McDuff.
Oh, yeah? You played with Jack?
Yeah, played with Jack. Brother Jack. Yep, Brother Jack. Played with him about a year. And got to the point I just didn't want to be in a car anymore. It's one of those years where musicians were dying like crazy in car accidents. And you'd hear about it. And I just, it's like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So I ended up spending 6 months in Boston. The keyboard player from Baltimore named Webster Lewis. He's passed away, but
yeah, I know Webster.
Incredible band. Oh my goodness, this band. We had reached the point where they had so many arrangements they got tired of playing them. So first person on stage would just jam, and everybody would join in. So you could never repeat a set.
Cool.
It would, and these guys, like, if they didn't have a gig, they would go and substitute teach at Berkeley and New England College of Music and stuff. New England Conservatory. So I was pretty intimidated, but man, I learned a lot. I think that's what opened a lot of doors, like to be able to play with Weather Report and a lot of that stuff. This stuff was so free, and you really learned how to listen,
Where did you play in Boston?
It was a club called what was it called? I'm confusing it with a club in Denver because I used to go there a lot. It was in Cambridge, just across the river. Oh, man.
Was it like Jack's or something like that?
No, it wasn't Jack's.
Wasn't Pooh's Pub?
No.
Okay.
It'll come to me at some point.
I was just wondering.
But, yeah, when I wasn't playing, I spent all my time in Paul's Mall and the Jazz Workshop, which was side by side in Boston.
Yeah.
But, it was a really cool little club. There was one night we didn't play, and because Roy Haynes was in town, he had his band in there, and man, I was just front and center,
I bet.
soaking it all up. I saw him about 5 or 6 years ago when he was pretty much almost 90, and he sounded the same as when he was 35. It was just as fiery and tasty. And like,
I just got into a Roy thing like 4 days ago.
Oh, okay.
On YouTube,
Wow, yeah.
And, just checking them out. Snap, Crackle, Pop.
Yes.
And because he lived in Boston,
right. That was his base for a long time. It's. I mean, after 6 months of that, it was like, okay, it's time to go to school. So I went back to Baltimore. Then I went to school, finished 2 years in a community college. The music faculty at this community college had left Peabody Conservatory, which is a real snooty conservatory there. And they wanted to take over a situation and bring that kind of education to ordinary people that weren't wealthy, spoiled rich kids.
Yeah, right.
So I got like a conservatory education, man, for community college prices. At the end of those 2 years, I was going to transfer to University of Maryland. In between, I ended up getting an audition with Zappa. He liked my plan, so that was that.
How did that come about?
One of the things I did during that 2 years I was there, no, before that actually even before the McDuff gig, there was a company in Baltimore that went into management. They were like concert promoters, and they decided to try managing groups. So there were these two groups. A guy who became a really dear friend later, a guy named Marty Perellis, was assigned to manage these groups. And we just got to be close, got to be friends. And I eventually, like I said, I went on the road with McDuff. He ended up merging the two groups, getting them as far as a Motown deal. So after a few other adventures in L.A., he ended up as Zappa's tour manager. And so Frank had another drummer, Ralph Humphrey. Yeah. But he had mentioned, I guess, to my friend or in conversation, however it came up, that the band had gotten too perfect. And he was thinking maybe bringing a second drummer with, as he called it, a street feel. And so my friend set up and he said to him, man, I think I got the guy for you, So my audition consisted of just jammed for an hour. So it was Frank, George Duke on keyboards, bass player named Tom Fowler, and man, we just went at it, At the end, Frank says, you got the gig, and started rehearsing that day. So,
was this in L.A.? Or?
Yeah, L.A.
Yeah.
So
that's when you made the move, huh?
Well, we went straight on tour. We did a month. It was a month of rehearsals, 40 hours a week, which was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Went straight on the road.
And Ruth Underwood.
Yeah, she was in that band as well.
Yeah.
So we basically, by the time that ended, it was close to Christmas, I guess. So I went home for Christmas. Had to wait for the weather to break to be able to drive cross country. Packed up my television and my pillow, and that was it.
The essentials.
Exactly.
TV and a pillow.
Didn't have much else, actually.
That's killer. So how long were you in the Zappa band?
For 2 years. He canceled a tour, and Alfonso Johnson, the bass player, him and I actually were friends from that earlier situation where there was the groups that were being managed.
Oh, yeah.
He played in one, I played in the other, but we jammed every chance we got.
Okay.
We would just jam every chance we got. And so, basically, he was saying, man, the guys are in town. Why don't you come down and jam with Weather Report one night? And in conversation, he had mentioned this. He said he think they'd gone through almost 10 drummers that year.
Really?
It was like, man, I really don't like auditioning. He said, no, it's not an audition. Come down, jam with the guys, I said, okay. So I bring my drums down. And of course, there's another drummer there. This guy was phenomenal, man. It's like, but
you remember who it was?
Yeah, he's passed away. His name is Woody Theus. He called himself Sunship.
Sunship. I remember
he did.
Sunship.
He was more known for
John
quite
McLaughlin.
a few avant-garde. Yeah, well,
he played for Mahavishnu for a minute.
No, that would have been that was Narada.
Yeah,
Narada Michael
Sunship
Walden.
Played. I don't know.
It's possible. I know he did some of the more avant-garde kind of stuff.
Yeah,
the guy was phenomenal.
Yeah, I remember him playing a solo and reciting poetry.
That could have been him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the guy was amazing, absolutely amazing. And we just kind of went back and forth. They kind of tried one thing, and he kind of froze. He didn't quite know what to do, which shocked everybody. Huh. They kind of, and it was all improvised stuff. None of this was like calling tunes.
Right.
You know? And they did like this very ethereal kind of ballad kind of thing. And the guy had so much fire when he played, man, it just like riveted you know, in your seat. Mm-hmm. But when it came to that, he just kind of wasn't sure what to do. And I think because I'd done such a variety of stuff, especially that band in Boston that I mentioned, you know, it wasn't an issue. I kind of heard parts and I just went in. And they first talked about, well, what would you think about working with two drummers? And it's like, well, you know what? I did that for the first year with Zappa. Man, take this guy. He's phenomenal. I got a gig. You know, we're on a break right now. But so they went back and talked and thought, well, and they offered me the gig. And so.
Was Alfonso the bass player?
Yes, yes. And so basically after playing that music, it was kind of hard to go back to the other stuff, you know. And again, we went straight into rehearsals and went straight on tour, and it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, I bet. With Wayne and Joe Zawanu.
Oh, goodness, yeah. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Alex Acuna came later. There was a Brazilian percussionist before, a guy named Alirio Lima.
Yeah.
And Alex came later. And it was interesting because it was in that band, with Weather Report, we would do things like, you know, I mean, the worst thing you could do with Weather Report is repeat a night. Is play something the exact same way twice.
Really?
Oh man, they hated that, you know. Well, because that meant you weren't really interacting and listening. But we would do things, man, just out of the blue. We would all do something, I mean, incredible. Like we'd all make some stop or play some figure, never talked about, never rehearsed, and it would just happen that way. And I'd go back to the hotel room, and it was really interesting because I go back to the hotel room, first of all, after all that power and that amazing, you know, thing, the room would feel so empty and lonely, really.
Really?
And then I would reflect on what we played, and it's like, how is that possible? Because you got Wayne, who's a Buddhist. You got Joe, who's just Joe. You know. Yeah. Alfonso and myself both grew up in East Coast black neighborhoods, so we spent lots of time in church.
Right.
Okay, mamas didn't play that stuff, but you ain't going to church. Okay, this is probably before Alex. So Brazil, I'm not sure where Alirio was. Brazil wasn't. It became a very strong Christian, you know, country in a lot of ways, but not at that stage. At that stage, it was pretty pagan, actually. You know. And so you know, I'm kind of thinking, man, I want to know what this is. It's like, it can only be one spirit. It's like, even as different as we are, I knew that kind of unity could only come from we're being fueled by the same thing. So I went out and got some books trying to learn how to meditate and all this stuff. And a few years later, oh goodness, at one point, my wife and I got a little sidetracked through a friend that said, man, you got to come hear this speaker. And we ended up sort of listening and checking out this guru for a while. But they would say, like, read all the scriptures and they'll confirm us. And it's like,
really?
If you say so. Okay, so we read all the script. Yeah, I mean, I seriously studied, like, I mean, I've read these books like, you know, the Book of Tao, the Book of Buddha, the Bhagavad Gita. The only thing that really resonated was the Bible. But it was the King James Version, so I can't say I fully understood that. In fact, the only scripture I remember was that when it says, I send out my word and it doesn't return void. I had no idea what it meant at that time anyway. And my wife and I, every night, every morning, we would diligently try to study the Bible on our own. Well, eventually, a dear friend, Abraham Laborio, him and I had become friends in Boston while he was going to Berkeley.
Okay.
And he had moved to L.A., him and his wife, and he had become a Christian. And he came over one day, and there was a poster of this guru guy. And he finally said, this is not the truth. Only Jesus is the truth. This is not true. And so we kind of go back and forth. And one day, because we had this, oh goodness, beautiful friendship. And one day he says, my brother, I cannot come back to your house while you have this thing. Really? Well, this is here. I cannot be, yeah. And he meant it, you know, and it really crushed me. Long story short, we ended up going to a life group, you know, a home group at his church. He was going to a church in L.A. called Church on the Way, a pastor named Jack Hayford. Mm-hmm. So we started going to the home group, and yeah, I had never experienced the Holy Spirit like that. Mm-hmm. You know, my church growing up was pretty traditional, you know.
Mm-hmm. Traditional black church.
Yeah, Baptist. And, you know, the ushers with the white gloves and the whole deal.
The fan.
Absolutely. You got the fans.
On the back.
Now, at the same time, I mean, I was baptized at 11 because I really wanted to try to get it right. I really wanted that.
Okay.
But I didn't really get involved in a youth group. They kind of had one. We had moved away by then, so I had to walk over a mile to go to that. And I didn't feel like I fit in. It was like, you know, I grew up in a single parent home, you know, my mother, and these kids were probably I just felt out of place, you know. Uh-huh. And so over the years, I kind of fell away just trying to be cool, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, after my wife and after we got married, we had our first son, and I guess it was a year later we came to the Lord. That would have been 1980, you know. And man, I was touring with Genesis at that point.
Okay.
And
so what? Yeah, go on.
So
I have another question for you.
Oh, okay. So anyway, you know, the guys, they you know, when you're on the road, when you're on tour, a big tour, it's a traveling small town.
Right.
So everybody knows everybody's business, kind of, you know. And it was interesting watching the change in how I was treated, because they're watching you like a hawk, you know. And I wasn't trying to preach to anybody. I would just, you know, on the plane, I got my Bible out, you know. I guess something changed because they would no longer let me in on the dirty stories, and, you know.
Yeah.
I just, you know, it was respectful, but I was definitely not one of the guys anymore,
right.
You know.
I had that experience when they shut the door because they're doing drugs and they don't want to see you.
Right.
Because
a conviction sets in, you know. Yeah. Exactly. You know.
So how did you transition from Weather Report to Genesis?
Well, the gig ended when we finished recording Black Market. We had taken a Christmas break. I was in Baltimore. I came back. And so I called Wayne up. I said, man, when are we going back in the studio? I just got back in town, and I knew we were supposed to resume. And I got, you know, I'd got my first Altrin machine shortly before that. So I get this weird message from Wayne. He says, well, we're going in tomorrow, but don't bother to show up. It's like, it's a strange message. So I called Joe. I said, Joe, what's going on? And Joe said, well, didn't you quit? What are you talking about? Well, Alfonso, they had promised him membership in the band. For 3 years, they'd been promising membership, and it never happened. Then they changed management, and the new managers were saying, like, absolutely no way. You know, you keep it just like it is. And in the meantime, even unknown to me, because Alfonso and I were close, but he was keeping everything real close, just, you know. And I really knew nothing about this. He had gotten actually a solo deal with Columbia as well, the same label that Weather Report was on.
That record.
Yeah, and I played on some of that, and they, you know, basically Joe and Wayne quit their gigs to form Weather Report, and Alfonso and I were so close, they assumed that we were doing the same thing. They didn't ask; they made that assumption.
Wow.
And so I'm saying that Joe was saying, like, well, didn't you quit with Alfonso? It's like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about. Alfonso quit? What do you mean?
Yeah. So
Joe was like, well, if you didn't quit, you're in the band. I said, okay. Well, Wayne said you guys are going in the studio. And by then they've hired Jocko, right? And Joe was way up front. He says, well, we had asked Jocko who he wanted to play with, and he suggested Narada. Michael, you know, Walden. And so I said, well, man, how about if I play percussion along with Alex? I mean, I need to work. It's Christmas. You know, I've been buying gifts and stuff.
Yeah.
And Joe would say, well, yeah, bring your stuff and come on in tomorrow. So I brought my little percussion stuff and, you know, together with Alex, you know, and Narda got to the studio. He was, got there. I was there first. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" I says, "Well, I'm going to play. I'm in the band." He says, "Well, they told me I'm in the band." It's like, well, okay.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it got intense. So basically, like I say, like the title song, Black Market, they gave him the credit on the album. But in actual fact, the first half is me.
Really?
Then when it goes to the bridge, it's him.
Okay.
If you ever listen, next time, if you ever hear that track where it goes to that bridge section, exactly.
Right there.
Everything, the sound of the drums changes, the reverb changes. It's a different day of recording.
Yeah.
And
it's a different day.
Yeah, they spliced them together. Because I had already done the track all straight eighths, just like the intro. So they kept my first half, and then the other half going out was him.
Wow.
And he played on that thing Canon, which he did a fantastic job, really beautiful job on that. I mean, the guy's a great player. You know?
Yeah.
And so it got weird. Rehearsals at that point just got strange. Because they told the manager who told me that they really loved what I played on the tracks, and so when we got in rehearsal, I think it was a little bit difficult for Jocko to swing the same way that Alfonso swings. Like Alfonso and I had like this. We grew up playing funk. I mean,
Yeah.
And so we had this looseness space with us, and Jocko was pretty straight 16ths on a lot of stuff. And they were so determined that he's in the band that it's like, well, I'm playing it wrong. So it just started getting ugly,
Yeah.
Eventually, Alex moved over to drums, and, they brought in Manolo, but,
Wow.
So that's how that ended.
I first met Alex Sacuna's drum clinic. It was the first drum clinic I ever went to.
Oh, man, that's one way to get started, boy.
Yeah, he was working at hotel in Vegas. He was in the house band.
Yeah, right.
And I went there with the Temptations, and that's when I met him.
Okay.
And he said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Nothing. Sleeping." He said, "I'm doing this clinic over at the Musicians Union.
Okay.
Why don't you come over and check it out?" And it was great. Just
blew
me away. And I was like, people play like that?
Right.
This is before I got in. I mean, he was kind of instrumental in me getting into Tony and Billy Cobb.
During
that time. Yeah.
Sure.
So that was great, And
have you heard him lately?
Not lately, no.
Frightening.
Really?
Oh goodness, yeah. Yeah, I saw a video clip of him on that drum channel thing. And he was playing like a rumba clave. And he was singing fives and sevens over it. Like yeah, I mean, it's like, deadlocked. It's like
have you gotten into Konakol?
No.
Konakol is the Indian rhythm language.
Right. I have not. I just had this conversation a few days ago, as a matter of fact. It's the whole. The concept that there's a syllable for each subdivision. That it totally makes sense. I've just never got into it. The way I teach these days, it's like my concept of playing the drums has radically changed from earlier years. To me, it's like everything's a melody now.
Okay.
My drums are my notes. Obviously, you got to count, you got to read.
Right. Not so much like beat orientated, but
right.
Melodic.
Well, most people, anybody, whether they're a musician, if they hear something, a melody, a song they like, they can sing it. They may not be pitch perfect, but they can almost immediately sing. Let them hear it 2 or 3 times, they can sing it. Well, I feel the same way about this. If you take that approach and hear it melodically, then you can get a lot closer to being there,
right,
without having it. Now, if you haven't played very long, then you're going to see 1 E and a 2 E, and that's on the that's on the and, But if you take your time and sing it and can identify, if you hear the melody of the drums, then I think, for me, I'm finding that I've gotten really good results with students approaching it that way.
Do you have your students sing while they play?
Sometimes, not often. I was at Belmont for 20 years teaching,
right?
And Yeah, basically over the years, it's like a lot of things, a lot of concepts formed and changed while I was there doing that, just trying to, communicate,
Yeah.
And that's kind of that's where it came to is through that,
Mm-hmm. I studied with Alan Dawson in Boston.
Oh, goodness, I'm jealous. Yeah, I was there all that time and didn't have enough sense to try to get in touch with him.
Really?
I was scared, actually.
That's what I went to Boston to study with him.
Yeah.
I played with Miroslav for about 6 months.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And he had just done his first solo album with Warner Brothers, that Magical Shepherd, where he had the double neck.
Oh, yeah.
He wanted to be John McLaughlin, but then he wanted to be Miroslav.
And it's so funny because the beef with Weather Report was that he refused to play electric.
Yeah, and he went totally electric.
Well, I mean, what do you do after that? It's
Yeah.
like, maybe I better look into this.
Right.
Right.
And then most of the critics got on him because we went out on the road for a while, and most of the critics got on him because he wasn't playing upright.
The Jazz Police.
And he felt bad about that.
Well, George Duke produced a funk album for Christian McBride.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, the jazz world just tore him up over that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they just got all in Christian's face. Man, it was like, it was a good album. Funk, I mean, his dad was one of the first call bass players at Philly Sound, at TSOP.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
Wow,
he grew
I
up
didn't know that.
with all that stuff. Oh, yeah.
Did you go see him last week when he was here? Christian?
I didn't know he was here.
He and Edgar
Winter?
No, Edgar Myers.
Edgar Meyer, the bass player. Oh,
Yeah,
no,
they did a concert over at Vanderbilt a week ago tomorrow.
Man, no, I totally missed that.
Yeah, I couldn't go. I was in a rehearsal.
Oh, man, yeah, I got to.
But I'm pretty sure it was great.
Oh, well, yeah, how could it not be? I mean, I actually did some stuff with Christian along with George Duke.
Okay.
George did a jazz symphony thing, or Muir Wood suite. And I got to do that with him.
Yeah.
Stanley recorded it, but when it got to be some gigs that Stanley didn't do, Christian did most of them.
Okay.
And I even got to play with Ron Carter on one time.
Oh, really?
He came in and did it. Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, man, that's great.
That's the greatest compliment I think I ever got. Ron came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you for playing with me." Because I can imagine all the Tony wannabes that go there. It's like after I'd played with Weather Report, every time I would do a clinic, sometimes I would ask for a local rhythm section, and as soon as they found out I played with Weather Report, they break out all the Jocko licks. And it's like, no, this is not working.
Dang. So after Weather Report, you get with Genesis. Is that correct? Is that the timeline? Is that better?
Well, close. I did quite a bit. I did a lot of sessions. I played a lot of fusion stuff in L.A. I was kind of like the utility guy. Between the stuff with Zappa and Weather Report, I did a lot of stuff. If it was weird time signatures and I had become quite a student of Brazilian stuff by then.
Okay.
So I ended up doing, just this wonderful assortment of music. Mm-hmm. I'd never been to Japan, found out the Pointer Sisters were going, so went and did an audition with them. That's when they were doing all the Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross stuff.
Okay.
And so, went down and read through the audition and ended up going to Japan with them. Did that for a while, and then through a friend, Roy McCurdy, actually, the Wiz had come to town, because it was still running on Broadway, but they started an L.A. company. Uh-huh. So then I went down and, played through the book, and I didn't start right then, but I picked it up came in the last week to prepare for going to San Francisco. The show was going up there for 7 weeks, and then it went to Chicago. I always had wanted to play a Broadway show, and there's no better show for a drummer than the Wiz,
Okay.
I mean, back in the day, that was, And in doing that, Dee Dee Bridgewater had left L.A. to do the show there. She was moving, I think, to Paris at that point. So they brought this lady in to replace her, whose name was Roz Clark, which is now Roz Clark Thompson. So...
And there you have it, folks.
Yeah, so
the rest is a marriage.
And while I was in San Francisco, I get a call and I hear this little English voice on the other phone. Hey, this is Phil Collin. Want to know if you interested in joining Genesis? And because he had become the singer, Peter Gabriel, it was the singer, and Phil always played drums. Well, they could never find the right singer to replace Peter, so they kept auditioning singers. Phil ended up singing on the album. Then it was time to go on tour, and they still were auditioning singers, didn't like anybody. So suddenly Phil's the singer. The first tour they did, I think Bill Bruford did it. They did a short summer tour. Bill did that. The following year, I guess Bill hadn't really committed to it. He had some other stuff going, and so Phil called up. He had seen what turned out to be the last Weather Report gig, which was in London.
Oh, yeah.
And I did an album with Frank called Roxy and Elsewhere, which was 2 drummers on that, Ralph and myself. And so he was looking for somebody who could play with another drummer because he wasn't going to give up the drum chair. So we did quite a lot of double drumming. He didn't he didn't really sing from the kit, just maybe a couple of tunes or a couple of instrumental sections. It was all prog rock in those days, all time signatures. There were no hits. No, there were no women in the audience whatsoever. And and as the writing became more concise and they started cranking out hits, then all of a sudden, obviously that all changed. And it's not like they sold out. They just learned how to say in 4 minutes what they used to take 10 minutes to say.
Yeah, that's a good way to see it.
So basically that started 76 was those first rehearsals. First gig was January 1st, 77. Last gig was 2007, 30 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. This includes your playing with Phil?
Well, in 81 we finished. Yeah, we'd finished the last gig of the tour, and Phil had a couple of different drummers who had said they were going to do his gig, and then like each one separately, bailed on him at the last minute. So he came to me at the end of the show and says, "Man, I need a huge favor. The guy who's supposed to do it, he'll remain nameless, but." Basically he says, "Man, can you help me out? Because I was trying to keep this separate from Genesis, but the guitar player Daryl Sturman was going to do it because Daryl helped him finish some of his songs, And I just jumped in. So it got to be like 1 year I toured with Genesis, next year with Phil, back and forth for several years, touring with both of them, and reached a point where 92 was the last Genesis tour. And I had mentioned, man, I can't do both anymore. I need to take a break, mainly because my son had turned 13, and I knew I needed to be home.
Yeah.
13 was a weird age for me. I started playing in clubs, but I didn't have a man to talk to. My mother was great, but things were just confusing. And I was just determined that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And your son is quite the musician.
Oh goodness, yeah, he's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah. I hear about him.
Yeah, he's the real deal.
Yeah.
Guitar, bass, drums, keyboards.
Wow.
His arranging and writing is pretty intense, too.
Is he still here in town?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he is.
Okay. Yes, I had my guest I had on the radio yesterday is tour manager for Rascal Flatts.
Oh, okay.
And he was singing his praises. This guy came in to audition. He's Chester Thompson's son. Man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We have to have a conversation about that off air.
Yeah. he dug it. He dug it.
Yeah, he came away thinking that they didn't like him at all. He came away feeling like,
really?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It was not a comfortable situation for him.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That was weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, he didn't get any sense of that they liked anything he did.
Huh.
So who knows?
Well, how.
But he's been with Little Big Town for 2 years, and they seem to really appreciate him, and he likes working there. So it's been a real good match. Yeah.
So how did you come to Nashville?
That's a good question.
Now, you lived in London for a while.
Not officially. I mean, it got to the point we would rehearse for 4 to 6 weeks, and it just hotels got old quickly. So I'd come over, man. They'd pick me up from the airport. And it's like, take me to the car rental. Here's your car. This is the address of your flat. see you tomorrow.
Cool.
So I got to the point
That's
where,
great.
so I've lived in several places. I didn't officially move there, but I got to really know it very well, and I always had a car to use, and it was kind of like, you just do it,
Home away from home.
Yeah. I mean, my son even got to go to school one semester there,
Oh, killer.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. So how did you come to Nashville?
Well, I say it was the work of the Lord. It was definitely, I came here, let's see. Okay, so Larry London had been a really good friend. He was a dear friend. Pearl used to send us out to do clinics together, and him and I just locked. I mean, it's so funny. We're like so radically different, but man, there's just this kinship that happened. And we were in touch, and so when he went through the thing where he got ill and stuff, I was, really pretty much in touch. In fact, I was in Texas. He fell off the drum stool doing a clinic at North Texas State. And a couple of days later, they sent him down to Dallas to a hospital there. They couldn't quite deal with it. They didn't get stuff right. But anyway, I was in Dallas for production rehearsals for a Genesis tour, so I got to go every day to the hospital and visit, with him and his family and stuff. And so his son, kind of let me know, kept me up to date on what was happening. And so when he passed away, I came here for his funeral.
Okay.
I came in the day before because I have to really work to be on time for stuff sometimes, and I didn't want to be late for anything. So I came in the day before. This is pre-GPS. So I got my gas station map, found out all the streets, looked up the street addresses. I had the addresses for the church and, all of that. Took the ink pen and marked it up so I could follow the map. And, so I drove the whole route the day before just so I wouldn't be like at a total loss,
Yeah.
And just fell in love with it. It's
Really?
like, man, look at this place. Well, if you live in L.A. for a long time, and I was there for 20 years, and, man, if it said river, it had water in it, what a switch, L.A. wasn't very green anymore because they built it up so much. Yeah. I was there long enough to see the traffic and population really pick up, and it got to the point where it was just getting impossible to get around. I think what really happened, when you're being prepared to do something else, I think your heart is prepared first. I think that's what it really was, because I loved living out there, but the last couple of years, it just didn't feel good anymore. I mentioned to my wife and my son, it's like, well, what do you think about Nashville? My wife was like, I don't think about Nashville.
I don't.
Right, and they were like, well, if you want to move to Nashville, we'll come visit you,
Really?
So it's like, it kept going. It's like, no matter what was going on in our lives, the answer was in Nashville or Brentwood. It was like, what? So finally, I got booked for a session here, which came out of the blue,
Right.
So I said, well, okay, let's all go. You guys can explore around while I work. So then we got a call that they needed to postpone the session. So it's like, okay, well, now we'll hang out together. So we came down. A week later, we'd bought a house, registered my son in school, and went back and started packing. They knew when we got here, it was just so obvious that this was home.
Man, that is
so I've now lived here longer than anywhere.
Really?
Yeah.
I've lived here longer than anywhere, too, even in my hometown.
Yeah, same with me. I mean, I left Baltimore at 24, and I've been here this summer will be 26 years. So.
Wow. Man, were you still working with Phil when you moved here?
Not really, kind of. I mean, basically, so Phil quit the band right after I left, the first time. And and I had already said, I'm not doing it, which turned out to be a good thing because he went on tours 94. He actually did an 18-month tour, which meant my family would have been here less than a year and I'd have been gone a year and a half. Except, I mean, it's like with breaks in between, but like you get 2 weeks. Right. You take 6 weeks off in the summer, but other than that, you're only home 2 weeks at a time. Dang. In the meantime, Genesis tried a different drummer and guitarist. They tried a whole different thing, bass player. So they did something called Calling All Stations. They did this one album, and they tried to go back to the Peter Gabriel days, more of the real heavy prog rock stuff. It didn't catch on. They tried to book a tour over here and just couldn't generate enough tickets. So after that, they just said, forget it, I was out and started back working with Phil. We crossed paths again. It was the right time. My son was like graduating high school. He's like, man, I need you to come back in the band. It's like, it was perfect timing.
Yeah.
So, basically we were on tour. I think it was 05, 04. We were playing London with Phil. They were giving the manager a party and celebrating his 30 years of management with them. Okay. And it's interesting because I never felt like I was in the band because I'm a hired gun, just like the guitarist, Daryl, and it's the three guys,
Yeah.
But I must admit, everybody showed up for this little party that night. And, man, I was really caught off guard with how right and warm it felt with everybody together. It's like, wow, this really was a band, And so they gave the manager, ordered this beautiful gift they gave him and stuff. And so we're all standing there, and, he's accepting it and stuff. So Phil kind of goes, well, we're all here. When's the tour? And, man, the manager's eyes got that big. That was his real gift,
Yeah.
And the guys were like, well, yeah. So it took 07 for it to happen. It was amazing. The best tour ever.
Really?
We laughed all day, every day. Everybody was over themselves. It was like, it was just like they were doing it because they want to, not to promote some album, playing the songs they wanted to play. They didn't have to promote anything, At the end of that, we were supposed to go back out in 08 to South America, and I guess they were going to add in Japan and all that, and Phil quit again, So it's like that was his second retirement, I think. So he's retired 4 times, right?
Wow.
He's actually touring now. His son's playing drums with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, he's doing big tours. He's like selling out like crazy all over the world again.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they just finished New Zealand and Australia, a few weeks ago. They did a small U.S. portion. They've done Europe, Canada, and I mean, he's been hitting it hard.
Killer.
But he can't really play anymore. He's had so much nerve damage from surgeries that he can't quite hold the stick. So and he walks with a cane now. So he's on a stool the whole tour. But he's
still singing. Huh?
Oh man, apparently he's singing really good. He's had some issues. I mean he was really depressed for a while, but man, it seems like he's back on track.
Well, before we run out of time here, I want you to tell us about your trio. Tell us about your trio.
Well, that's kind of no longer happening. However, the song that you just played at the opening, that's from a new CD that copies just showed up last week. So the official release will be next week. I'll bring in a copy before we get done.
Cool.
So that was Alfonso Johnson on bass.
It was.
Yeah. Okay. Same piano player from the trio, Joe Davidian. Rod Magaha on trumpet. And a percussionist out of Chicago named Tony Carpenter. Okay. And did it up at Sweetwater. They do a thing. They do these recording workshops, and the way they do them now. They had done it with Peter Erskine, and it turned out really well. And I'd been trying to get the trio up there, but by then Joe moved to New York. Mike Rennie, the bass player, took a gig with Miranda Lambert, and he was just gone all the time. A great gig for him. I mean, I'm happy for him, but that meant the trio was kind of dead in the water. And this door opened to go up there and record, and it's like, well, can I do it, with, just me doing what I want to do and not with the trio? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. So I was able to put this thing together. I'd been writing and stuff, and so, I didn't really write on the trio stuff. Now I think I've got 4 tunes, and I wrote a bunch of interludes that go between songs, mostly drum and percussion stuff. And I use this wave drum thing. I got a lot of fun with that.
The Korg wave drum?
Yeah, one of the later ones. I've got the original too, but this was the Oriental one.
Oh, okay.
And so it's now I gotta get to work and promote it. Yeah, it's because it's totally indie, so you got to do what you got to do.
You got to do it, man. That's great.
Yeah, so it's phone's still ringing. I'm still showing up, man. Praise God. What can I tell you?
Yes. He's a good God, man.
Absolutely.
You've had a very storied career, and it's still going on, man. You're very fortunate Very fortunate.
Yeah, I was blessed. I mean, you know, I have to say, I think the one thing, even during my periods of confusion and thinking I was sophisticated and all that, it's never been out of my mind where it comes from.
Right.
You know, it's like I didn't have to play drums. I mean, I could have been whatever, but I was given that.
Right.
So, you know, there's a level of accountability that I think that comes with that. You know, I mean, even though you mess up big time, when you really find out, you know, the extent of the forgiveness, the redemption. I mean, oh man, you know, it's like
we don't get what we deserve.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, hey man, I want to thank you for coming in here and having this conversation and telling us all about yourself. You know, it's a real thrill to have you here with me. You know,
thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Heard how you made all these transitions and stuff. And God bless you.
God bless you, man.
I look forward to seeing you and hearing you in the very near future.
Absolutely.
Somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, we live too close, man.
Yes, we do.
Got to do it. All right.
Thank you, folks, for listening. See ya.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.